Hello, beautiful light-filled souls. Trisha Barker here. If you're not a part of my spiritual community, I want to offer you a way to get many downloads and recordings that may help you on your spiritual journey. I don't know if you are like me, but I consume a lot of healing work and a lot of shadow work from various sources. And one thing I've noticed is that after things are cleared out, there isn't enough work on what to put back in. That light of God, that joy of being alive, that affirmation that you can live differently. And certainly therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy can teach you different behaviors. And I've been in therapy most of my life. I'm a big fan of it, but I've also tried many different modalities. And I think when you have trauma at early ages and continuing trauma at other points in life, there is so much shadow work to do and to clear out. And one thing that I can say that the near death experience gave me was I came back with no shame or guilt. I came back knowing that I am a child of God, that I am loved exactly as I am, and that I know that all of the things that happen here, the suffering, the pain, can be replaced with that love of God. Now, it takes work, it takes connection and meditation. And I want to assist you in this way to share with you these downloads because they've helped me and I want them to help you as well. My heart especially goes out to anyone who has suffered child abuse or any form of neglect, especially in those first 7 years of life. We all know that programs can be very deep at this age, and sometimes you may not have suffered abuse, but you may have interpreted things in ways that seeded different programs that became painful to you later in life. So anything that happens at that level that is a deep program that is hard to get rid of, I want to offer my light and my assistance in that area. Now, one thing in consuming a lot of what is out there, I've noticed after shadow work, there isn't something to replace that clearing, to immediately replace a sense of renewed confidence, a sense of your own power, a sense of the light that you are, especially the light that you are in the presence of Creator. And so I am coupling all of my shadow work with something to replace what is painful and what you want to release and what you no longer need in your life. And that to me is just as important because many people who've suffered abuse or neglect don't seem to have a lot of support in their lives, or they don't seem open to a lot of compliments. And our angels are there complimenting us. Other people can be more supportive. We can choose more supportive people at times, and we can be aware of boundaries in different ways and be aware that we can receive so much healing from Creator, from God. One thing that suffering teaches us is it teaches us to have greater wisdom and insight. And a lot of times people wonder, what is the purpose of all this suffering on earth? And of course, there is connection to other people who have suffered in similar ways, but there is, if you're open, greater insight to healing and a greater insight to evolution and moving people forward in a way that we haven't seen in the past. And that is ultimately what light work is this projection into the future, this clearing of programs, of course, that have harmed us, but also this replacement of that wisdom from God, that wisdom that is forgotten here. So ultimately, it's a return of consciousness, a return of awareness, and a return of positivity in the sense of knowing your worth and knowing your value and adding value to this world. And in that way, it's quite simple. So shadow work to me is when a situation comes up in life, we can either blame our past, other people, or we can begin to work on ourselves. And even if we don't have a greater part in something that happened, we still can add healing to this world. And everyone knows that choice that is made. And my light just flickered on and off. So yes, you can either go dark or you can go light, and you can go much brighter. And that's what pain teaches us, is how to grow. And I don't know if you remember any growth spurts in childhood or in your teenage years, but it hurts. Like, it hurts to grow. It isn't a fun process at any age, at any time. But ultimately, seeing the truth is better. And sometimes seeing the truth is not seeing what's negative. I mean, sometimes it is. Sometimes might think about a situation of you're driving down the road, it's late at night, you're so tired, you need somewhere to stay, and you see a motel, and you check in and sleep for the night, and then you wake up and you think, oh, this is a terrible place, and it hasn't been cleaned, and how the outside is awful, it's not even a great part of town. How did I pick this place to stay? Well, that's the light of awareness, and certain situations can seem like that as you gain greater awareness. But the opposite is true as well. I returned to my near-death experience where I was incredibly superficial as a young person, and I missed the kindness and the goodness of people's hearts around me. And I judged many people on superficial qualities, or on their intellect, or what they were studying in school versus who they were, their true hearts. And one thing that changed after my near-death experience was I did look into the hearts, and I made more of an effort to see who people truly are at a core level. And I had so much more appreciation for my fellow human beings. So part of this clearing and part of the light work is returning to seeing the goodness in others. And I'm going to actually post a few good news YouTube channels that I enjoy. And oftentimes these channels are the wonderful work that people are doing to save wildlife and to save animals. There's something beautiful about people coming together to care about animals. And that's uplifting to many of us, because animals can be so pure and innocent in their state of just being, and we have so much to learn from that. So much of our ego is nonsense, and so many situations of suffering are created by the ego, and as soon as you let go of it, you're so much happier. Like, why did I even care? Why did I even care what other people thought, or what this situation was about? And my happiness and my truth is so much more important than what other people think. And I think a lot of times that ego, it's invisible to us in certain situations. And then when you remove it, there's just so much joy, so much childlike joy returns to our lives. And so if you find yourself in that mentality of focusing on the negative things in this world, because our whole culture is pointing this out, then I'd like to guide you to the light work. So clear out, what in you is gravitating to this, and then definitely put in that ability to see the goodness in the world, to see the goodness in other people, to not be so calloused as to miss out on amazing friendships, opportunities, connections. The world is forcing us to isolate in some ways, but I'm also seeing people reach out and find connections and find ways to start businesses, to make dreams come true, to really move forward with connection. And that's what I'm choosing to focus on, is the ways that people can connect, that they can help one another, that dreams can align, and that life can change and move in this trajectory of greater light. You look at different places around the world that are healthy, and community is one of the things that helps people live longer. So isolation does not help us live longer, that being connected to others helps in any way. So even if this is online, even if this is is through volunteer work. I was on a discussion board, just kind of perusing a question, as we sometimes can do online. And I was listening to someone talk about how sobriety is boring and how they spend so much time at home, and the only choice is to go out and volunteer. And I thought, that's the wrong attitude. That you never know what great friendship you're going to make when you volunteer. You never know who you're going to find on this path of life that gives you insight at a certain time, that becomes a business partner, that becomes the love of your life. You never know what your journey has to offer you. And when you feel that childlike joy slipping away, then let it return and at least be a conduit of light. That's ultimately where I have always seen my life going, is that as a near-death experiencer, I want to hold more light in my vibration. I want to send more light. And in order to do that, I have to grow. I have to grow past parts of my ego and past parts of my own fear. And even going to that light of God, you can know God at this deep level, but you still return to a body and a world. And you have to interact with people who are passive aggressive and annoying, and just dealing with you in very 3D superficial ways. And it can, if you let it, bring your vibration down. But you don't have to let it. You can stay grounded in your truth, and you can stay grounded in your light. And this is the kind of work that is incredibly important to me. So anyway, check out these downloads. And if you feel called to purchase the first ones, just know that everything I do from that point forward will be added to this library. So you're getting in, at the ground level, and I'm going to be clearing many different topics and providing those affirmations and light work to replace it with. And I think that's just as important. People talk about avoiding shadow work. No, I think that for the most part, people are doing shadow work all the time in therapy and, with shamans and in all the different modalities, but they're not really learning how to receive love. If you didn't have support growing up, you don't even know what it feels like. And so that has to be seated in you, and you have to know that feeling of being worthy of all the things you haven't received in the past. And that's huge work. That's just as important as shadow work. And you can, obviously, there's the problem with staying too positive and not looking at the shadow work. But I think we need both. We need the two combined. And that's what I offer, is a combination of these two. So if you would, check them out. And if you have time to join my spiritual community, you have access to a lot of recordings and a lot of downloads like this. So mainly, I want you to meditate, to practice self-care, and to believe that you are connected to your angels, that they care about you, that they have been with you. Even if you do not feel the support, act as if you do. And some of it may show up at your darkest times. You might feel carried by this light. And that's ultimately what I want for other people, is to know that the spiritual reality is much stronger than this reality. It's the thing that lasts. Our souls are what last. That is what is eternal about us. And so any work that you do to remember your truth and to connect with the truth of you that is eternal is amazing work. So kudos to you, those of you who are open to this, and to anyone who is lost and suffering, have hope and try what I am offering, because I am sometimes speaking to my younger self. I'm sometimes speaking to myself who suffered in great ways, and I didn't have the tools at that time to get myself out of that place, but I have them now, and I want to share them with you. May you be blessed.